Today we're going to read a story. We're not going to read the whole story, we're going to read chapters. And this book is called Meet Kirsten, an American Girl. It's a series of the American Girls collection. And so it's going to be exciting to just read one or two chapters a day. Meet Kirsten, an American Girl by Janet Shaw and illustrations by Renee Graff. Some of the pages won't have pictures. They're going to be just words that I'm going to be reading. So here's Kirsten. She's 9 years old, and she moves with her family to a new home in America frontier in 1854. Here's her Papa Lars, Mama, and Peter. The Larsens sometimes long for Sweden, but they never lose heart for the challenges of the pioneer life. Kirsten's family, these are Kirsten's friends. Marta, Kirsten's best friend on the long trip from Sweden to Minnesota. So they were going to move to Minnesota. Anna, Aunt Iger, Elizabeth, and Uncle Ole. Kirsten's American relatives live on a new farm in Minnesota where they make the Larson family feel at home. So they had come a little earlier. Chapter 1, America. That's America, Kirsten said happily. She stood at the ship's railing with her friend Marta and pointed to the green strip of land beyond the waves. Overhead, the tall sails creaked in the wind. Marta shaded her eyes and pressed against the railing as though that would make the eagle sail faster. I can't wait to walk on land again, she said and shivered. Kirsten touched her friend's thin arm. Are you cold? She asked. Let's go sit where the wind isn't so strong. She tucked her ragdoll sari into her shawl and walked to a coil of rope that was as high as a barrel. Then she hitched up her skirt and climbed into a space just big enough for two girls to sit knee to knee and forehead to forehead. Marta crawled in after her. It was warmer here in the coiled rope, but the wind still whistled overhead. Kirsten took her handkerchief from her pocket and made a cape for Sarah. Marty's doll wore her apron like a shawl. Soon we'll be on land again, Marty told her doll. Don't worry about the wind. Kirsten pulled a piece of hard, dry bread from her apron pocket and broke it in two. She and Marta fed their dolls before they chewed the bread themselves. What's the very first thing you want to do in America? Kirsten asked. I want to pick an apple, Marta said dreamily. There are apples everywhere in America. Apples, said Kirsten. When Kirsten said the word, she could almost taste the crisp, delicious fruit. We'll pick cherries too, she said, and we'll get fresh bread, Marta added. I think we'll be there by tonight, don't you? Not if it storms again, Kirsten answered. She peered up at the darkening clouds and pulled her shawl more closely around her shoulders. Above her head, she saw the sailors crawling into the rigging to adjust the sails. Then she heard Papa's voice. Kirsten, where are you? He called. Kirsten stood and shouted, Here I am, Papa. Strands of blonde hair pulled loose from her braids and whipped across her cheeks when she raised her head above the ropes. Papa's black wool jacket flapped like a gull's wings as he crossed the deck. There's a storm coming, Papa said. It could be dangerous. The coast is rocky here, and the wind is getting... See, there they were, in where the ropes were. And the wind is getting stronger. Papa lifted Kirsten out of the coiled rope. Then he pulled Marta out too. Come below where we'll be safe, he said. The clouds rolled like water boiling in Mama's black iron pot. The tops of the waves turned white and crashed over the sides of the ship. They dashed onto Kirsten's boots as she scrambled toward the opening into the hold. Hurry, Papa said. He held tightly to Kirsten and Marty's hands. As Kirsten climbed down the ladder into the hold, her spirits sank. Of course she didn't want to be washed overboard by the waves, but it was awful to stay in this small room below the deck. For more than 2 months, 20 Swedish families had been cramped together here. Each family shared 1 or 2 of the bunks that lined the walls, and everything they owned was stored in large trunks which stood at the end of the bunks. The beds were bunked like 1 and 2, and so they were not just one bed, but there was 2. This air smelled sour now, and it would be worse when people got seasick. No fresh air would come in when the sailors locked the trapdoor against the waves, and the hold was dark, even in the middle of the afternoon. Just some oil lanterns swung and sputtered over some tables in the middle of the room. Kirsten could barely see Mama, who was lying on her side in the narrow bunk she shared with Kirsten. Here you are, Mama said as Kirsten crawled up beside her. I asked Papa to find you. I don't know where you can hide on such a small ship. Marta and I were playing. We could see land from the storm before this storm blew up, Kirsten said. Mama sighed. I prayed there would be no more storms so I could be strong when we land in America. She had been sick since the first day they came aboard the ship, and storms made her feel worse. You'll be strong again soon, I'm sure of it. Don't lose heart, Mama, said Kirsten, and now the wind howled like a pack of wolves. The waves beat against the ship's hull next to Kirsten's head, and the ship tossed as though it might tip over. Outside there was a loud crash. Mama put her arm around Kirsten's shoulders. Don't fall off of the bunk, she warned. Buckets tumbled over one another, and old Mr. Peterson's trunk skidded. Just look at them. There they are. See Mama and Kirsten. The waves beat against the ship's hull next to Kirsten's head, and the ship tossed as though it might tip over. That's what she was so afraid. So this trunk slid across the wet floor. The lantern swung wildly, then dropped beneath the table. See, there it is, and it dropped beneath the table. Mama, Lars says the coast is full of rocks. Do you think we'll be blowing into them? Kirsten asked. She could barely hear her own words above the roar of the storm. Don't think about the rocks, Mama said. Let's think about Uncle Olive's letter instead. Do you remember your Uncle Olive? Kirsten had heard about Uncle Olive so many times she thought she remembered him. Tell me, she said. She snuggled close to Mama, tried not to think about the howling storm. Olive left Sweden 6 years ago when he was just 3, Mama said. He thought he could make a better life in America. And last year, he wrote to tell us about his new farm. The land is rich and good there, and he needs our help. In Minnesota, Kirsten said, stumbling over the strange word. Yes, in Minnesota, Mother said. Now you tell me something. Uncle Olive married Aunt Inger in America, Kirsten said. She thought this was the best part of this story. And Inger came from Sweden too. That's right, said Mama. Olive said he married a widow with 2 daughters. My cousins Anna and Lisbeth, Kirsten finished. We'll be friends, don't you think? Of course, said Mama. We'll live on the same farm. They'll be right next door. The waves still pounded against the ship in the dark hold. Kirsten hugged Sarah's red body and whispered, we're almost there. We're almost home. She tried to imagine a farm right next door to her new cousins. She hoped this American home would be just like the one when she left in Sweden, with a maple tree by the door. When the storm finally passed, Kirsten felt like the barn cat she once fished out of a well. Her skirt and shawl was wet and stained. Her boots were soaked, but everyone was safe. The sky was clear, and the eagle was sailing toward the green coast once more. Kirsten watched the seagulls swoop and dive as she stood on the deck with Mama and Papa. I smelled the earth again, Papa voiced boomed. He held Peter, who was 5, on his hip. Mama smiled at the shore as though she greeted a friend. She leaned toward Papa, and Kirsten heard her whisper, so many times I lost hope that we'd all make it to America. You're a brave woman, Papa said. You have heart. I'm proud of you and our children. Kirsten's brother, Lars, who was always talking with the sailors, pushed through the crowd. Just then, the sailors say we'll land in New York tomorrow morning, Lars said. That's wonderful, Mama, Trey replied. We'll have fresh bread for breakfast, and I'll find a place to wash our clothes. They say we can't leave the ship until the health inspector lets us, Lars added. What's the health inspector? Kirsten asked. He's a doctor who will look at everyone on the ship. No one who is sick can stay in America, Lars explained. But Mama is sick, Peter cried. He held out his arms and Mama hugged him. Mama has only been seasick, Papa said in his deep voice. Almost everyone gets seasick on the ocean. The health inspector looks for illnesses like typhoid and cholera, illnesses that kill people. No one on our ship has cholera, Lars said. That's right, Papa replied. You see, Peter, we don't need to worry. Let's see you smile again. Tomorrow we'll be in New York, and then we'll start our journey to Minnesota. When the Eagle finally docked in New York Harbor and the health inspector said they could leave the ship, Lars bounded down the gangplank. Peter scrambled right behind him. Mama and Papa went next, then Kirsten. She held Sarah tight. Kirsten was bursting to run and turn circles on the grass she saw near the docks. She was surprised when she stepped off the gangplank, and the ground seemed to spin around her. In Sweden, it had been steady under her feet. Here in America, it swayed and rolled like the ship she just left. She grabbed Papa's hand and said, "Why am I so dizzy?" "We're all used to the rocking of the ship," Papa answered. "Now we have to get used to the dry land all over again." For a minute, Kirsten stood still. Then she turned and looked back at the Eagle. When they boarded the small ship, no one had known what to expect. There had been dangerous storms at sea. They had been sick, but at last they had arrived in America. What will happen now? Kirsten wondered, but she was more curious than afraid. On wobbly legs, she followed Mama and Papa up the path into the park near the dock. There's New York. She's in New York. That's the first chapter of this book, and the next chapter is called Lost, and we're going to find out why someone is lost. So thank you for listening today, and have a wonderful day. God bless.